Something like that. Hey, welcome back to a Family Day edition of Open Shutter, and have the legend back, Jason Foley, on for his 12,000th appearance on this podcast. We were just talking offline how Jason should have his own name on the Wall of Fame. You'll be the first person up there, man.
The rafters.
100%, 100%. You're probably like the most well-prepared, presented person I've ever had on this show. So always like having you back. And you know, for the 5 people that don't know who you are, maybe like, what do you want people to like know about you, kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first off, happy Family Day,
Family
everyone.
Day, man.
Happy Family Day. Yeah, my name's Jason Foley. I'm an amateur photographer based here in Brampton, Ontario, Canada. And gosh, if I think about the videos that I've done with you guys, I've touched on everything from digital photography, film photography, astro, macro, developing film. I do a little bit of everything. Anything related to photography, I absolutely enjoy. And my profession is in the data field. I'm a data analyst. So this is a lovely creative outlet for me. And do a little bit of stuff for pay. I've sold a few of my prints on canvas and stuff like that, but it's certainly it's a side hustle, if anything. It's really just a hobby more than anything else.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, we were just saying offline how, you know, there's just so much to know about like photography, and you're just like giving me like what you're up to. So like I know your thing is film mostly, right? Like that's kind of like your passion.
You know, it's as we were saying there, the flavor seems to change, right? And I go through phases. So right now I'm very much in the film side of things, but once the summer months roll around and there's an abundance of insects, I pivot to macro photography and then astrophotography again. This year I'm hoping to combine a bit of astro with film. I'd like to try to do a large format photo of the night sky on black and white film. We'll see how that turns out. But yeah, I don't really pigeonhole myself into any one specific type of photography. I like to dabble in a little bit of all of it. Yeah,
it's a good message for everyone out there. So you don't have to kind of like be like stuck in one kind of niche, you know.
Yeah.
But, oh, it's great, man. Maybe just show your IG for the people that that will kind of want to have a peek at your work. But I mean, some good stuff here, man, lately, right? Like any photos that really like stand up for you, kind of thing.
Oh gosh, well, I was just outside yesterday taking a picture of a snowflake. I mean,
this one, right? Oh my God.
It's like
PTSD. Okay.
Yeah, you know what? All this snow, I'm thinking I need to find an upside to this, and so I grabbed. That was actually a lot of fun. To do that basically was almost an uncropped image of a snowflake, and so that's utilizing, 45 megapixel full frame camera, a very, very unique macro lens called a Canon MPE 65. That it's a purely manual lens, and it allows you to do all the way up to a 1:5 magnification. So which is pretty impressive. Very, very difficult to use because it's all manually focused. You're literally focused by moving the camera closer or further from that snowflake. Then I also added a set of 3 extension tubes and a ring flash with a battery pack on my side holding 12 AA batteries so that the flash could keep up to a burst mode on my R5. And probably the most technical type of photography that you can do with a snowflake, because of course they don't stick around long. And believe it or not, the angle of, I call it the angle of attack, essentially, that you're photographing that snowflake on actually matters when it comes to the reflectance of the flash. And I've mentioned him before. There's a photographer named Don Kamarechka, Canadian photographer, but he now lives elsewhere in the world, but incredible macro photographer. So look him up. And everything, honestly, that I know about photographing snowflakes, I learned from that guy. I actually did an on-site session with him one time, and yeah, incredible. So so that's on the extreme end of digital technical photography.
Kidding, eh? Like how long did it take you to get the shot that you liked? Like
I was outside for probably about half an hour, so it wasn't bad. Usually I'd be out there for a couple hours, but I knew, I mean, you could see on the back of the screen that I got a set of images that I could work with that one. Yeah. But then
Wow,
it's
man.
post-processing wise, a couple hours of working it because you're focus stacking.
Right.
There's a lot of work that goes into it. So gotta
Wow,
love
that's
snow.
great.
Yeah.
You gotta love snow, or just at
Gotta love
least make
snow.
make the best of it,
At least
right?
learn to like snow. Yeah.
So are you
Yeah.
just standing like in the front of your house,
I
or
literally did that on my doorstep. Yeah. And so what I took was a wool scarf. And
ah,
what happens with a wool scarf, because of the fibers, snowflakes will actually sit on top of the fibers.
ah,
And um, and then if it doesn't work out after a few minutes, you just shake it and you start over again. And you just literally let them fall on that wool, on the wool fibers and
oh,
again. And you're literally balancing this camera setup is probably about this long. So you have it kind of resting on your thumb. You have the other end resting against your face, and you're literally just moving back and forth like that. Because believe it or not, even something as small as a snowflake, at that type of magnification, you
yeah,
can't get the entire thing in focus from front to back. You
yeah,
actually have to move the focal plane
right.
across the snowflake to get enough slice
Man,
back later on. So yeah, it's a pretty
super,
super cool. Yeah.
super cool though. Yeah, like you don't really see too much of this stuff, you know.
No.
You kind of see
Yeah.
like the wide images like of the snowstorm, but to like
Yeah.
zoom in on like a single snowflake, I think that's
It's
pretty
actually quite
cool.
beautiful. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Great,
Yeah.
man. Any
So
any other? Yeah, sorry. Go.
no, you go ahead. You go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna ask you if there are any other images that stand out for you that you've taken the last little while.
Of late,
Yeah.
photography is tough for me in the winter. I'm not much of a winter guy.
Right.
But my daughter is going to school
Mm-hmm.
down in the St. Catharines area. So just a hop, skip, and a jump from Niagara on the Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Niagara on the Lake. So
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of film, evening street photography there, over the last few months, and I've enjoyed that. But like I said, winter is tough for me.
Yeah.
I did do a studio photo.
Oh,
Let me see if I can grab it.
okay.
Actually, I did do this one, and this one actually was. Hold it up real
Oh,
quick.
nice.
And I'm going to talk about this camera.
Yeah, talk about it.
This is my Hasselblad 500 CM,
Shout out.
and that's actually that was done in a single photo. I should say it took me over 170 attempts to get this photo, but there's no
Right.
Photoshop or anything like that in this one. That's actually me. I took a photo down through the waist level viewfinder of the Hasselblad, which was basically projecting the image of me sitting, kneeling in the hallway in my basement here, holding another film camera in my hands.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't see it in this at all, but if you get close enough to the picture, you can actually see my eye in the lens of that camera. So that was an incredibly technical, fun shot to make, and it's on my Instagram there. If people are having a look, you'll be able to see that there too.
And
But
very Inception, man.
yeah, so doing stuff like that here at home is a lot of fun in the winter. Kind of
Yeah.
studio type photography. Yeah.
Here, I found it. I found it for the people that want to
Mm-hmm.
show it real quick here.
Yeah, it's my
Yeah, I see.
my favorite self-portrait by far, because it's my favorite camera, and it was and I'm wearing this hat. No
Yeah,
less too.
exactly.
Yeah, but
There's
in
no
my
Photoshop.
eye, in that you can actually see in
Yeah.
the lens, you can actually see my eye looking back.
Wow.
It took over, like I said, it took about 170 attempts. In my hand, what you can't tell is underneath the camera, I have a remote trigger. So I would fire off the R5, and I have a flash to my left, on my one side of me. Sorry, on my left, and then there's a flash next to the Hasselblad illuminating that.
Yeah.
But to get my eye where it needed to be, it was that many attempts.
Right.
Yeah.
So you gotta be patient.
Very patient. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't happen right away sometimes.
I have an abundance of that.
Well, it's good, right? I think sometimes that's just like part of the whole, like, just like the sense of like achievement, right? Because when you get it, it's like I'm sure it feels really good, right?
Well, we live in a live in an age where people can manufacture a photo simply out of a prompt, right? And
exactly.
And I guess there's a place for that. It can be fun, and but yeah, this is kind of how I prefer to do things. It's a lot more work, and it's very rewarding. Yeah.
100%, man.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how'd you get the idea, or just
You know what? So this is my second version that I've taken of that type of photo. I have another camera called an Exacta Verex, and it also has a waist level viewfinder, and where you stand and you look down into the camera. And I wish I could tell you exactly how I came up with it. I think I was just sitting there one day. I wanted to I love taking gear shots. I love photographing vintage cameras because I think they're a work of art on their own.
Yeah.
And I just decided to give this a go it was again right here in the hallway, just behind the camera here. And I stacked up a bunch of boxes with a black sheet over top of it. And then I had my tripod kind of positioned over that with the camera facing straight down. And it was looking down into the waist level viewfinder. And then I kind of went around out front and I sat down on the floor and I did the whole remote trigger thing. And at first I was like, my gosh, that actually works. I could see myself in the waist level viewfinder. But it was a lot of trial and error of getting the focus right, because there's no autofocus in the Exacta that I'm photographing. So I had to kind of get that all dialed in, get my positioning dialed in, the lighting. Eventually, once I liked it, I ran upstairs. I changed into some better clothes, came back downstairs, and again took dozens and dozens of photos until I got one that I really liked. And that was the first version. But when I got the Hasselblad, I thought, you know what, I'm going to do a version 2.0, and I actually liked that one so much that I printed it for my
No
wall.
kidding.
Yeah,
No kidding.
yeah.
No kidding, man.
But that is one of the cameras I am going to talk about today.
Yeah, so, yeah. Well, I mean, is that like your favorite?
Yes. Yeah. So they're you know, out of I touch on 35 millimeter medium format and also large format film, and that's in the medium format range. And but I would say it's the most historically significant. It's right up there with one of the Leicas that I have, but it's very, very significant camera. And there's just something about it. I can't explain it. That the waist level viewfinder, if you haven't tried that before, it's such an interesting way to take a photo. My thought there is that instead of looking forward when you take a photo, you're actually looking down, which kind of removes you from that scene. You're no longer looking at that scene. You're looking down at, essentially, it almost looks like a screen. And what's interesting is when you turn right, it turns left, and when you turn left, it turns right, because there's not a prism, it's a mirror. So even that, I find, really forces you into a different mindset where you're now thinking of the composition and its elements, because you have to, because of the way everything reacts. So it's definitely how I feel about large format, because large format is not only right to left, left to right, but up is down, down is up. So you literally see the entire world upside down and backwards in your viewfinder or in your ground glass. So all of a sudden it becomes very intuitive, and you start looking at shapes and leading lines and rules of thirds, and everything just completely changes. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's a different experience, right?
Very different experience.
Yeah, because I've had other people that do film, and they tell me that all the cameras these days are the same. Yeah. They look the same. They like feel the same. Like there's nothing different. There's nothing exciting about cameras, right? So they're telling me, no, if you go into film cameras, it's a whole different thing. You get really excited about using it.
That's a pretty great segue. Why don't I jump in to the ones that I have?
That's what I'm here for.
Because I think that's exactly the perfect segue.
Yeah.
But while we're on that topic, I think what I want to do first, before I do anything else, I am going to grab my modern camera, and talk a little bit about why I brought the other three vintage film cameras. So this is a modern mirrorless camera made within it doesn't really matter which model, but done within the last 4 to 5 years, let's say. And I wanted to talk about it because of how incredibly spoiled we are using this type of equipment. And it kind of ties really well into what I'm going to talk about with medium format modular cameras. So this camera, it obviously will do ISO 50 all the way up to, I think, 12,800, something like that. I have shutter speeds that'll go up to 1/8,000th of a second. It's modular in that I can interchange the lenses. It has IBIS. It has everything all built in. Matter of fact, it even has and every camera has this now, a pop-out rear screen, which when you think about it, if I wanted to, I could do a waist level viewfinder essentially by looking right down at it. Very interesting to me, and I'm always drawing parallels like that between modern equipment and what we used to have to do. So I wanted to touch on that first, because the three cameras I think that I have here, it's interesting to see how it had to be done in the past to achieve all the same things that we see here. So the first one Well, you know, first of all, why don't we talk about what defines a modular camera? Because I think that's
sure.
it's probably very straightforward, but modular meaning that you can interchange the components of the camera. Again, we take that for granted with newer cameras. You can swap out your lenses, you have battery grips, we have different things. So that essentially makes a modern camera a modular camera as well. But when it comes to vintage cameras, it's a little bit different. So the first one I want to talk about, I'm kind of jumping right to what I think is the ultimate. It's kind of the benchmark. I think it's the one that all others would strive to be back in the day.
Sure.
This is the Hasselblad 500 CM. So what makes this modular? Actually, first off, I should say this is a medium format camera. So you'll notice this about me, Paul. I jump all over the place.
I love it. Keep going, bro.
But this is my little cheat sheet. I think I showed this once before.
Yes, you did. I showed it.
Yeah. So this is 3 different types of film that I use. Now, the Hasselblad that I'm showing you uses medium format film. This is called 120 film. This here is 35 millimeter film. That's essentially what we're used to today with our full frame cameras at 24 by 36 millimeter sensor size. That's essentially what that's mirroring there. And then that's large format film, which is 4 by 5. And I have one camera that shoots that. But so today I'm talking about medium format modular film cameras that use 120 film.
Okay.
So if I go back to the Hasselblad, so what makes this modular? So with modern cameras, ISO is something we can change, obviously. You even have the ability in your camera through camera profiles, if you wanted to shoot in color. You could shoot in black and white if you wanted to do it all in camera. With vintage film cameras, we certainly didn't have that luxury. The Hasselblad has interchangeable film backs. So you can see I popped that right off of there. Now, one of the interesting things about shooting film in the past is once you commit to an ISO, you're kind of stuck with that ISO for the entire roll of film. There's something we would call it the box speed or the stock speed. I like to shoot a film called Ilford HP5. It has an ISO rating of ISO 400. If I start off this roll at ISO 400, I'm going to finish that entire roll at ISO 400. We don't have the ability to change that mid-roll. That's where a modular camera comes into play, because I can load HP5 in one film back. I have another film back that I could put a roll of color Portra 400, and mid-roll I can change that out. So that's how a modular camera addresses that challenge. Of course, with modern cameras, we don't even think about it. I can change the ISO from shot to shot. I can even set my camera at ISO, and it'll do auto ISO, and it'll do all the work for me. And of course, I have the ability in camera or in post-processing to change between color and black and white. The other thing that makes them modular is the viewfinder. So this is the waist level viewfinder that you saw in that photo that I showed you, where you look down inside of the camera to compose your image. These are interchangeable. So you can pop this off as well and put on what's called a prism finder. And a prism finder now adjusts the right is left, left is right that I talked about earlier. And the other thing that some prisms come with is a built-in light meter. And I should say that by default, the Hasselblad has no light meter in it, the 500 CM. But by adding this prism on it, I now have a built-in light meter for this camera. So that's another great aspect of the interchangeability of this, is being able to go to a waist level viewfinder. And of course, interchangeable lenses. So I have just one lens for my Hasselblad, but you can put on all different focal lengths. The unique thing about the Hasselblad is the shutter is inside the lens. So it uses a leaf shutter. And one of the advantages of that, of course, is that you have a sync speed at any shutter speed that this lens will do. Now, this lens will only go up to 1/400th of a second. So keep that in mind. It's not a very fast shutter speed when it comes to this particular lens. So from a historical standpoint, and I think I've talked about the Hasselblad before, that's actually the camera model that was sent to the moon on the Apollo missions. They were modified versions of them. They were obviously beefed up. They had a mechanical winder on them. But from a historical standpoint, that's why I think I love the Hasselblad so much.
Cool, man.
Now, to pivot to another one, so actually, why don't I say this real quick as well? A couple other things about it.
For sure.
If you were looking for a Hasselblad right now, so just that body with the lens and that waist level viewfinder, I mean, prices vary wildly depending on how the condition of the camera. They also continue to make a few different models after the 500 cm, so that also dictates the price. But you're starting at probably $2,200 and up.
Canadian? Canadian?
Yes, Canadian. Yeah.
Okay. It's not bad.
It's not terrible. Well, you think about it, one RF mount lens will cost you double that. So I always kind of laugh about that when we get kind of upset about the price of vintage cameras. I think it's still very reasonable when you compare. Yeah, the fact that you could have a piece of history for half the price of one modern camera.
The moon, man, the moon.
Yeah, the moon.
It's
so
moon.
This camera, I like to call this camera the 57 Chevy of the vintage camera world, and this is called a Bronica S2, and it is absolutely on my eyes, it's a beautiful camera. And I'm trying to make sure that the Hasselblad doesn't hear me because
yeah, exactly.
So this is the Japanese answer to the Hasselblad. And I'm going to try to pronounce his name. Forgive me here.
Right.
Where is it here? Zenzaburo Yoshino.
Shout out.
Yes.
Watching this.
He is the man who invented the Zenza Bronica. Okay. He pumped all his money into this thing to developing a cheaper alternative to the Hasselblad 500 series of cameras. And this is what he came up with. Now, he poured all his money into developing this body. He had no money left to develop lenses. And so the story goes, he partnered with Nikon. And the first lenses that came out for the Zenza Bronica line were Nikkor lenses, which are excellent lenses. So again, this is a modular camera. You got your backs that come off. You have a waist level viewfinder that can change out to be a prism. And you have interchangeable lenses. Now, what's a little bit different about this one is that, have you heard of a focusing helicoid?
No, I have not.
So you may not, if you're not used to vintage lenses, you probably haven't heard of that. But within a lens, obviously you have a focusing ring on a lens.
Right.
Inside of the lens, there's actually what's called a helicoid, and that's what moves the elements forward and backwards to achieve focus. I'm not sure exactly why he developed his this way, but the focusing helicoid and the lens on this camera are actually two separate pieces. So I can actually change out the lens here, but the focusing helicoid stays on the body. The advantage to that is that the lenses are very small. They're very lightweight. Now the weight of the body more than makes up for that, but they're very compact. And the way he designed this camera, to me, it's brilliant. And the other main difference is that where the Hasselblad had a leaf shutter in the lens, this one has a more traditional focal plane shutter, which is right at the back of the camera here.
Right.
This camera now can go up to 1/1000th of a second, so much faster than the Hasselblad. Yeah. But you do not have the same flexibility with the flash sync speeds that you get with a leaf shutter. This one, I want to say I think it's 1/60th of a second is the flash sync speed on this. So very different. Price wise on something like that now can start at like $425 Canadian up to about $700. So it's a third of the price, if not less, than the Hasselblad, but it gives you all of the same functionality more or less. And it's weight wise. The other thing I like to point out about these, because this is an escalating thing, the Hasselblad weighs a little over 3 pounds. This now comes in with the lens at 5.5 pounds. So keep that in mind. Yeah, so they're getting heavier.
Why does that have to be that way?
Yeah. Oh, it's incredible. But when you carry that one around in a bag with a couple of lenses and a few accessories, your shoulder starts to feel it. Yeah. Now the next one I'm going to talk about actually might take a little bit of lifting here. Is this beast here? Now this is called the Mamiya RB67. Again, it's a modular film camera. The back comes off. The waist level viewfinder can change out for a prism. I do have a prism finder for it. And the lenses as well are interchangeable. But this one it couldn't be any more different than the other ones. But at a glance, it looks very similar. It does have a leaf shutter in the lens, similar to the Hasselblad. So again, you have unlimited sync speeds for whatever this can do, but you are limited again to that 1/400th of a second shutter speed on this one. But this one has a couple of little party tricks. Now, you know how much I love macro and I love close-up photography. So I don't know if you're going to see this, but I don't know if you saw that. That extended out. It actually has a built-in bellows system. So I was actually able to extend this lens forward significantly, which of course reduces my minimum focusing distance. And so I'm not going to quite say I can do macro photography with this, but I can certainly do close-up photography with this. That's very unique to the RB67. The other thing that makes it unique is the RB stands for rotating back. So if you see the back, this is the film cartridge at the back here. This also uses medium format film, but the aspect ratio on this is a 6:7. Where, and I failed to say that, on the other two cameras, it's a 6:6. So the other two are square. This one is a rectangular format. Now, the party trick that this one has is you can rotate it. So I can go from a landscape orientation to a portrait
for social media, obviously.
There you go. That's right. Yeah,
get that Instagram. Get that Instagram.
It's a great little party trick that this one has in it, but again, mid-roll, you can literally change your orientation of your film, which on the other two, I mean, because it's a square format, it's a square format. But when it comes to this one, it's nice that it's built right in, that you can do that. The other thing that's neat, now I don't have one, but more and more companies are making them, are Polaroid or Instax film backs for these cameras. So I actually have an Instax back for my large format camera, which is really neat. I can go out with that 4x5 camera, the one that you put the hood over your head and you can pose the image in the ground glass at the back. But then I have actually an Instax 3D printed film back that I can stick on that thing, load it up with your Instax wide cartridges. I can take the photo on that film and press the button, and out comes the photo at the top, and I can get it to somebody. So that's like the ultimate mix of old and new.
It's like Back to the Future, man.
So yeah, exactly. So these cameras, that is one of the accessories that we're seeing more and more people are creating these interesting add-ons to it. Now that RB67, that weighs in at over 9 pounds. So you can see that the weight kind of, it's almost triple the weight of the Hassi. It was very much, I think, a studio camera. It was meant to be set up on a tripod. And that's, I think, where it probably, but I, of course, I love to hand hold that thing. I've actually walked around Bob Cage and literally with that RB67 hanging around my neck. It's probably why I have my hunch. But it really grabs a lot of attention, as you can imagine. I think one of the biggest benefits of all of these, not a single battery anywhere in sight. They are 100% mechanical, incredibly well engineered, all metal construction. And, here we are, the Hassi was made as early as 1957. The Bronica was 1965 is when they started making those. And then the Mamiya was 1970. So you're talking many, many decades old. And these things hold up incredibly well. Where I hate to say it, my mirrorless cameras, you look at them the wrong way sometimes, and I've unfortunately
doesn't want to turn on all of a sudden.
I've fried a couple, so but yeah, so that's for someone that's thinking of getting into film cameras, I still think 35 millimeter is probably a great place to start. There's an abundance of selection out there. Some of them have built-in meters. Those that don't, it's not really that big a deal. You can use your cell phone. There's a cell phone app called My Light Meter Pro, I believe it's called. That thing is fantastic to take a quick meter reading of a scene, and you'll know what settings to use on your film camera, right? There's a great Canadian company called Reveni Labs, and he's coming out with more and more 3D printed light meters that you can mount on the cold shoe of your camera, and you've got a digital light meter sitting right on top of it, which is really cool. But I still think, 35 millimeters is a good place to start. But if you wanted to get into something, I think on the medium format side of things, and you like that modular capability of swapping out lenses, swapping out film types, these are 3 great choices for sure. Yeah.
I'm just showing the light meters off
Ravenni Lab.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man.
I met him. There was a camera show last weekend, a vintage camera show that happens 4 times a year, and it's held in 3 times a year. I think it's in North York, and then once it's down in London way.
Okay.
And Matt, the owner of Ravenni Labs, was actually there demoing some of his equipment, so it was kind of cool to meet him. But he's got 3 or 4 different light meters now. Everything from incident meters to spot meters. I have a couple of his, and it's pretty cool seeing a Canadian company.
Yeah, well, I got to support Canada, especially these days, right?
Absolutely.
So shout out Ravenni Labs, man. That's cool.
Yeah, no, he's great.
Love that.
Yeah. So, and then the other thing that I wanted to talk about was, I guess if I could pivot to a real swing in a different direction. But first of all, let me ask, is there any other questions that you have about these, or before I jump away from film and go back to digital?
Dave, if you get the RZ67, you can put a digital back on it.
Get the Artisan
RZ67. He goes, if you get the RZ67, you can put a digital back on it.
Who's saying that? I'm so sorry, I'm not looking at the screen.
Yeah, it's just a comment from a
yes. The RZ67. So I have the RB67. The RZ, yes, I understand. I think that one has electronic components in it. And yes, I believe you can get a digital back. So there's digital backs made by Phase One. Of course, Hasselblad makes a digital back. Oh my gosh, I should talk about that real quick in a sec too. But yeah, that is one of the neat things where you can kind of get the best of both worlds. You get the mechanical experience of it. So this here, I'll go back to this for a second. So the Hasselblad, the Hasselblad continues to make cameras today, right? I think their latest one is the Hasselblad H2D, I want to say, I believe it's called. It's a 100 megapixel sensor, which is crazy. It shares, I think, the same sensor as the Fuji GFX 100. And what Hasselblad did is they also put that sensor into a camera called the 907X. And if you haven't looked that one up, the Hasselblad 907X. And it's a really neat camera that basically, it looks like that with a lens attached to it. Yeah. And that's it. And now what it has on it is a digital back. So the digital back is actually designed almost to look identical to this, but of course it has a flip up screen on the back of it. And it mounts to a very, very thin, I think it's about ½ an inch thick, what they consider the camera body. So the digital back mounts to this really ultra thin camera body. Then the lens mounts to the front of that. And the whole thing is probably no bigger than that. It's handheld. I actually held one in Montreal a few weeks back. It's pretty cool. It's also $13,000 just for the body, but that's it's not going to happen. But
details.
But the interesting thing that Hasselblad did was they made that digital film back compatible to the 500 series of vintage cameras. So I can take this off. I could put that digital back on here, and the back will detect what body is on it. I think you might have to go in the menu and specify, but once it's done that, it's a 100 megapixel vintage Hasselblad, which is incredibly cool. And if I happen to come into money, I'm going to buy one the next day, so you know. But yeah, it doesn't. What's interesting, even with that 100 megapixel back, it's still not a 6x6 sensor size. It's smaller than that. So interestingly enough, I would still say that the medium format film captures more, I'm going to put in air quotes here, resolution. It is a bigger frame size on the older cameras. But yeah, I think there's some adapters, and then there's old Phase One backs that I believe you can adapt to some of these as well to turn them into digital cameras, which is pretty cool. Yeah, really cool.
That's wild, actually.
You don't have 13 grand, do you, by any chance?
If I did, I wouldn't be here.
No, yeah, I'm sure you wouldn't give it to me either. Yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on medium format film cameras. There's more than that. There are,
Yeah.
of course, there's TLRs. TLRs are the ones that twin lens reflex, where you look down through the top through a waist level viewfinder.
Right.
But then there's two lenses. The top one is called the seeing lens. That's basically how you compose your image. The bottom lens is the one that when you take the shot, it exposes the film at the back. Okay. TLRs are great. There's all kinds of them out there. They're a great way to get into medium format film as well. I always like to show this one if I can get it. I think I showed this once before, but a really great way to get into medium format that's incredibly inexpensive is something like that. It's a little folder. This is called a Zeiss Icon Netar. You could probably get that for like $100, maybe even less than that. And it takes that 120 film. So that's a great way to get into medium format as well. But the cameras that I was talking about today, I think what I love about them so much, and they tend to be the ones I grab if I'm going out doing landscape photography or anything like that. I love being able to interchange the components.
Yeah.
What do they call it? The holy trinity of lenses. I don't know if you've heard that term before, right? A wide, a mid telephoto, and then a long. Yeah. That's one of my favorite things to do is to go out with in my modern cameras, I'll take a 16-35, a 24-70, and a 70-200. Right. Those three lenses and a good camera body, that's it. I mean, you got that's basically everything you're going to need when you're out doing landscape photography. Yeah, sure. For wide angle or I call it landscape sniping in on something you see off in the distance. Yeah. Being able to do that with my Bronica, for example, I have that series of lenses on the Bronica. So it's a really cool thing to go out with all of that and just have that flexibility. So that's but as you can see, it was a lot more work in the past to be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Is there like a best place to like shop for these bodies and accessories?
You know what? Burlington Camera is a great one. I don't know if you've been there before, but it's a great one to look up. They have a great range of old vintage cameras for sale. I want to say the owner's name is Barb. I think she's fantastic. Okay. And they also sell film. They develop film on site, so it's a great place to go. Downtown Camera, I understand, sells a lot of vintage stuff, but I think they're incredibly expensive. Yeah. And you know what? eBay, Japanese sellers. I think I might have mentioned that before. That Japanese sellers, pay attention to the ratings. And how did my friend explain it to me one time? That they tend to take very good care of their gear. And what to them, in some cases, they'll say that it's a mid-grade rating or it's in excellent condition, but they won't say that it's mint. It'll be darn near mint when you get it. Yeah. And they're very good with the service side of things. If there's something you didn't quite like about it, they're quick to make things right. And so I wouldn't hesitate to buy cameras online from Japan through eBay. I just wouldn't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, Kijiji and stuff like that. Just make sure you kind of learn what to look for with a camera. Once you've held it, you look, make sure all the shutter speeds sound right, and you look for fungus, and you look for all these different things. But yeah, there's lots of good places to buy them. It's great. And it's coming back. I keep saying that, but
it's been back for a while.
Yeah,
it's been back for a while. I mean, Roy here, he said that he started with a 503 CX and a Carl Zeiss 50 mil, 80 mil, and 180 mil.
Perfect.
907X and an XCD 45P.
He has a 907X too. Oh, I think he told me that actually. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, he's got that. I mean, I would love to have that same range of lenses for the Hasselblad, but I don't yet. I don't yet. I just have the one. Each one of these came with what they kind of considered a standard lens, right? And the Hasselblad, the standard lens for that was an 80 mil, which in 35 millimeter terms, that's about a 50 millimeter lens. Okay. The Bronica, similarly, it came with a 75 millimeter standard lens. So pretty close to that 50 as well. The RB67 that I got from the gentleman up in Bob Cajun I bought it from, his came with a 127 millimeter lens, which is about the equivalent of an 80 mil. So again, kind of going back to the studio usage of that, portrait photography, stuff like that, that 80 mil is a wonderful focal length for that. So But yeah, I mean, good glass is something you're always looking at.
Yeah, of course, right? Of course. David's asking, do you find getting C41 processes easy or hard in Canada?
So I was actually, when I first started developing, let me back up a little bit.
Yeah.
My mentor, Jim might be watching.
Shout out, Jim.
He taught me how to develop black and white film initially. So right out of the gate, I started doing black and white on my own. Then I started shooting color. I bought the C41 kits. The name of the brand is skipping my mind, which kit I bought, but I was also doing C41 at home. And what I found was I wasn't shooting enough of it, and the shelf life wasn't long enough on it that I'd have my chemicals expire on me. It wasn't cost effective for me. Mm-hmm. So since then, I have actually been struggling to find a really good local developing solution. There in Georgetown here, there is a couple places that develop film, but admittedly, they send it elsewhere. They don't do it themselves. Mm-hmm. One of them sends it to Downtown Camera. Mm-hmm. The results I get back if I do it that way are great, but by the time you pay their shipping and pay their market, and you know, it starts to become a little cost prohibitive. There's another one called Film Nation, I believe, is a new one. I think that's downtown Toronto that I think is competing with Downtown Camera. So I think we've got new ones now because I think the resurgence of film, we're getting a few more options, and I think the pricing is quite competitive. With Grain Nation, I believe it's called Grain Nation, and I think there's another one called C41 Labs. I think that's another one that's down there. Yeah. But you know what? I mean, if I live downtown, I would just take it to Downtown Camera because I think their pricing is quite competitive. The quality seems to be great. Yeah. But out this way, we're kind of stuck here in Brampton. We don't have any good ones here. Yeah.
Roy's also saying NG Art Labs.
I'll have to look that one up. Thank you, Roy. I don't know.
Roy's in Mississauga, but I'm not sure where NG Art Labs is. It could be Mississauga.
If it's Mississauga, I would take that over having to drive downtown.
Yeah,
right? That's the challenge is just getting down there, right? By the time
I know. the whole day. It's a whole day for you, man.
It's a day of frustration and anger.
Also, Jim is on.
Oh, hey, Jim. Nice.
He says hello. Jim, you got to come on the show one day.
Jim's probably sitting there going, there's so many more things you could say, Jason, about these cameras. I had it in my head, all the things I wanted to cover, but boy, I went through them real fast. But but they they're a lot of joy to use, and there's just it's because of him that I have this addiction, and he knows it. But why don't I pivot real quick while we have time to just go to something completely different now?
Love it.
Is infrared photography. So I can kind of transition, though, a little bit from film to digital because infrared, when I first tried it out, was on film. So there is, again, that 120 film. You can buy something called Roll-Eye infrared film. That's one of the brands that make it. And before we jump into that, I should not assume that everybody understands even what infrared photography is. So I'll give a very quick summary of what that is. There's something called the electromagnetic spectrum, and there's a very narrow band of that called the visible light spectrum, and that's what we see as humans. It's the colors we see all around us. Now, outside of that, on one side you have infrared, and on the other side you have ultraviolet. And our eyes can't see that, but infrared is something that you can capture on film or digital, but there's some process to it. So when I started researching this, I really wanted to give it a try. And to do it on film, the first thing you have to do is buy a type of film that is sensitive to infrared light. That's the first thing that you have to do. And that Roll-Eye infrared film is sensitive to infrared light. You then need to put a filter on the front of your lens that blocks off everything all the way up to just stopping short of infrared. So all of that visible light is essentially blocked from getting through. And if you ever hold up an infrared filter, it is dark red. And if you hold it up to the sun, you probably can't even see through it. That's how dark it is. But it does allow infrared light to pass through. So what's interesting doing it on film is that, so if you take the Hasselblad, for example, and that's how I first shot infrared, was on the Hasselblad. So you compose your image through the waist level viewfinder. I've got infrared film loaded up in here. And then once I have the composition ready to go, I have everything on a tripod. I take that infrared filter and I stick it on the front of my lens. I no longer can see anything through this voice level viewfinder. It's solid red. I can't see a single thing, but I know I've composed my shot. I then need to compensate for that light loss essentially by about 4 stops. So I change my exposure, roughly 4 stops of additional light has to get through. I can do it by making a longer shutter speed, narrowing the aperture, and so on. Once I've done that, you fire off your shot. Then you have no idea whether or not you got it. But once you get that film developed, you're able to see the world in infrared. And infrared, I actually have a couple of images that I'll come back to that afterwards. The best way to explain it essentially turns a summer, if you think of a summer landscape with lush greens and everything else, it turns it into a winter landscape. Vegetation reflects that infrared light and makes it look like it's all covered in snow, essentially. But then things like water, they don't reflect it, so they remain dark. As a matter of fact, they deepen how dark they are. Certain structures, buildings, things like that. It's just like an entirely new compositional tool. But on film, again, you don't know what the results are going to be until you develop that film later. So when I tried that on the Hasselblad, I was so taken by it, I knew immediately that I wanted to try digital infrared. And there are companies that will modify digital cameras so that they see an infrared. And there's a company out west called Night Sky. I want to, oh my gosh, isn't that awful? Night Sky Camera.
Night Sky Camera?
Night Sky Camera. And what they will do is they will either, you can send them a camera and they will modify it for you, or they even have a small inventory of cameras that they've already modified that you can just buy from them. And the way they do that, so I have a Canon EOS R here, and out of the factory, the Canon EOS R has a digital sensor in it that is calibrated to see the world in our visible light spectrum, right? Of course, you want the camera to capture what you and I see. That makes perfectly good sense. One of the things that they can do is they take the camera apart and they remove the filters that are that have been added on top of the sensor that block out infrared and block out ultraviolet. They actually remove those, making it what's called a full spectrum camera. That means now it can see all bands of light. But then what they do is if you say to them, well, there's different grades of infrared, and they're measured in what are called nanometers. 720 is kind of the most common. So you could say, I want to buy a 720 nanometer modification for this camera. They will reapply a filter on top of the sensor that will block all visible light, but will only allow infrared through. So when you get that camera back, and this is a mirrorless camera now, when you turn it on and look through that viewfinder, you are literally seeing the entire world in infrared in real time. And that really took infrared to another level, where I was able to, look at a relatively, maybe a boring scene, something that doesn't look all that interesting. And then look at it through here in infrared, and it just comes alive. And so that's one of the ways you can do it is through a company like Night Sky Camera. And there's another one. I always forget the names of the companies. But it's a US one, so forget them. Let's go with Night Sky.
Forget those guys.
So what I will do real quick. So this here is an example. Can you see that, by the way?
Yeah, it's like it's snowing.
So that was taken in, I want to say, September.
Okay.
And that's just a farmer's field up in the Kawarthas. And I pulled over at the side of the road. So that essentially is what you see through an infrared camera. It looks like all the vegetation's covered in snow. The skies, right in that particular photo, there was clouds, but if it was a blue sky, it becomes very, very dark. So it's a really interesting technique.
Oh, that's cool.
This one here, so this kind of demonstrates what I'm talking about, where the water will darken, the skies will darken, but your vegetation looks like it's covered in snow. Now, you'll also notice there's a little blue tinge to the trees there. Now, remember I mentioned that there's different grades that you can get of infrared modifications. The higher the number, the more the visible light that is blocked. So I think it's an 840 nanometer filter, literally blocks every single bit of visible light. The only thing getting through is infrared light. Now, if you go with a 720, or I think it's a 640, or there's even a 580, I believe, there's all these different grades. Each one of those, the lower you go, passes through a little bit more visible light that you and I see, along with the infrared. So when you do that, you're able to do what's called, oh my God, not color swapping, but you're actually able to introduce some color to these infrared images. And that's a whole artistic thing that you'll see when you research. If you look up infrared images online, you'll see quite a few people that have done photos where there's a real pink hue or a reddish hue to certain things. And it's another artistic tool. And you can do that through different types of infrared modifications. So, and I had one other one that was on here, just a structure, a barn that's again up north there. Yeah, so all of these are taken in the summer, summer, fall. Yeah, as if we don't get enough winter already, right? But I love making things look like winter.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I like the shot. I like that. I like that photo.
Yeah. But again, the first digital camera that I bought was a Canon 60D that had the infrared modification to it. That's not a mirrorless camera, but it does have live view. So you are able to still look on the back of that screen and see the world in infrared. Yeah. Mirrorless just kind of takes that to another level with the EVF, right? Yeah. And it's something that if you happen to have, I can't believe I'm saying this, if you happen to have an old mirrorless camera lying around, which, my gosh, sending it off to a company like that is, it can give it a whole new lease on life.
Yeah. You see things a totally different way.
See the unseen, as I think.
Basically, I guess.
Yeah, the owner from Night Sky Camera, I think that's one of his.
Is it
one of his catchphrases? There is, see the unseen.
See the unseen.
You're seeing the unseen. Yeah.
Well, you sold David because he's going to go out and buy one now.
Do it. Excellent. Any questions, David? Please reach out to me. But it's I've converted a few people over to.
I think it might be. Yeah. Roy's saying I Am Cuba film was shot on 16. The I Am Cuba film was shot on IR 16 mil film. Very surreal looking film images.
Yeah, there's different. So I mentioned the Rollei infrared film. I think there's a few different manufacturers that make infrared sensitive film. What's interesting is that if you shot that film regularly at a normal metering setting through a camera without that infrared, it would just be a black and white photo. That's what's interesting, is that photo you technically could just use it as black and white, but they've done something to it that also makes it sensitive to infrared. So if you block out that visible light, you just capture what's left, which is the infrared, which is pretty neat.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I've done it. It's neat because you can do it in the winter months. It's actually interesting because Jim had done a course on infrared at one point, and I think there's some misinformation out there that it's only a summer thing. People think that you got to have the sun beaming down to be able to do it, and it's really not. I think anytime your surroundings are being illuminated by the sun, period, infrared light is hitting everything around you. Right. Maybe there's more intensity to it in the summer, but it's still there in the winter. And both Jim and I have been doing some infrared photography of late, and it's just as much fun. Yeah,
no doubt, man.
It makes people look really creepy. If you ever take a portrait of somebody, if you take a picture of somebody in infrared, their eyes will be like black. Their skin almost takes on this kind of this
it's like a Halloween theme. You want to do like a Halloween
I wish I had pulled up that one. I took a picture of my daughter and some of her friends at a party where they had dressed up in kind of a goth theme, and they all stood there almost like kind of like zombies, and boy, was it cool. But I didn't get permission to share that photo, so I won't share
that. Super cool, man. There's so much to like learn and know and understand. Gosh, it's just like, whoa.
It's a lot. But that's the beauty of it, right? Is that with film, there is a consumable nature to it, obviously, right? Like when I shoot any of these here, sorry, I should say the Hasselblad and the Bronica, they're both 6x6. I get 12 images out of a roll of film. So I have 12 shots. It's funny. I kind of find that to be the sweet spot. Like if I'm out doing landscape photography or street photography, I'm really content with 12 photos, because I am a little more selective. you're really, a little more deliberate in what you're capturing. It's certainly not a spray and pray situation, right?
No, you're definitely not doing that. You're
You
really
cannot do
making
that.
sure. Yeah, it's got to be
Yeah,
photo
you make
worthy.
sure. The
It's got to be.
RB67, I believe, because it's a little wider, it
Yeah.
does, I want to say 8 frames on it.
Okay.
So even less, right?
Right. Okay.
But on
You got to be
35,
sure. You got to be
yeah,
confident.
yeah. Well, even
Confident
with
as well.
35 millimeter film, you get 24 exposures or
Right.
36, even that. When I put a 36 roll into a camera, it feels
Yeah.
like forever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's too
my
much.
mind has been adjusted now
It's
too.
too much.
It's too much.
Well, hey, man, like that phrase, less is more, I think is
Yeah.
sometimes true, right? Like,
But with digital, we have that ability and that luxury, right? But that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today was between, not to highlight how much more difficult it was, but it was just very, very different in the past, and you had to really think things through, and that's kind of where it all started, right? So, and I enjoy the pacing that comes
plus
from
you love it, but you love it too. Like
it
you
slows
really
you
like.
down. I don't want to be cliche about it, right?
Yeah.
But my God, our world's moving fast. So
Yeah.
when you can go out for a day like that and just, it's funny. I've even joked that if I don't have film in a camera, I still enjoy carrying it around because it's the mechanical sounds, and that's something I actually didn't do for you.
Yeah, a little bit ASMR, a little bit of
ASMR. Yeah, I'm missing
some
some of the best parts of this here.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, man.
That's the Hasselblad. So the Hasselblad has a lovely. So that's that one. The Bronica. And now I should say what you're hearing there is the mirror slapping back down, right? That's the bulk of what you're hearing when you're listening to that. Now, the Bronica, I should have said this too. He designed this differently. Instead of a mirror that slaps up and then back down again, this one actually slides down under the lens and back up again. And he also created something called an instant mirror return. So with the Hasselblad, when you cock the shutter, I can now see through the viewfinder, right? When I take the shot, the mirror drops away, and now I get blackout until I recock the shutter. The Bronica, he did an instant mirror return. So it whips the mirror out of the way, takes a shot, puts the mirror back before I even cock the shutter again. So little differences like that. I mean, I don't really know why he did that, but so this one here, I mean, I saw my red meter go off scale on the, but it rocks the earth, this thing.
Yeah, it does.
There's no silent shutter and that. And then the RB67. This one's kind of fun because this is cocking your shutter here. But then there's an alternative winder on the back that advances the film to the next frame. So it's a 2-step. Okay. And trust me, I've forgotten to do the one or the other before. But yeah, so that's a 2-step process. And then, so they make just wonderful, wonderful sounds. And I joke quite often that at least once a week, I will stand here in my cave here, and I will take every camera off the shelf, and I will go through the shutters, each shutter speed, change the aperture, open, wide, close it down, just to keep, for two reasons. Keep them moving, because vintage cameras, they will seize up if you don't keep them moving over long periods of time. But so once a week is a little overkill, trust me, but I still love it. And it's just to hear them. Because each one of them has a really unique character. So ASMR for me for sure. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm getting chills, man. I'm getting chills.
Yeah. We're gonna get. Do you know who reached out to Brian? Actually, and I were chatting about film cameras lately. So I'm wondering, there might be a chance that Brian might be trying some film.
Yeah, Brian's gonna get into film, eh?
And I told him that if he needed to reach out, and I'll extend this to you as well if you ever want one. I've got so many. I'm happy to lend one to you if you want.
I will. Yeah, you're the only person on my list, man.
Okay, good.
You're the only person on my list for sure, for 100%. Cool, man. Do you have any do you have any goals this year for you to to hit for or anything that you want to learn?
What? Funny enough, I would like to make more content. Yeah. Okay. I have a lot of different ideas. I actually wanted to do a video about infrared, where I go out with 2 cameras, essentially one non-infrared and then one infrared, and take the same scenes, right? And just really show the differences between the two. I thought that would be kind of fun, and also talk about what infrared is and how you do it and how you go about it. And then this, even just talking about these medium format cameras and the differences, I think there's a lot of interest in some of these different models. So I would love to create an actual video that I upload that talks about this. Maybe a bit more of a structured manner than what I did here today, but
no, it's good, man.
I think it'd be pretty cool to do that. But
yeah.
just making content is a lot of fun, and doing the editing and DaVinci Resolve, my gosh, it's fantastic, but it's just finding time.
Yeah, exactly. So like how do you find like the video editing part of it? Like, do you enjoy that?
Blast. Oh my gosh. It's DaVinci Resolve. I mean, it's like, how great is that for free?
I know.
Like, unbelievable though, with the quality of what you get out of that thing. And thankfully there's a whole community of people that have made enough YouTube videos about how to do it. And but it's a steep learning curve, like video profiles and knowing how to get the coloring right and stuff. My gosh, I should probably lean on you for that. And
no, you don't want to do that.
Don't call Paul.
Don't call me. Don't call me on that one. No, it's good, man.
What do you use? Do you use DaVinci?
Adobe.
Use Adobe. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, whatever gets the project done is like what I say. Like, whatever gets you to finish the project could be any kind of program out there, really.
What about you? What are your goals for the year?
Oh man, I want to retire.
I'm ready to retire tomorrow.
I know,
if the circumstances were right, but they're not. So.
I don't know. I'm just trying to meet more people this year. Like you missed on Saturday. We had a little meetup on Saturday.
Yeah,
with a bunch of creator day thing, which was cool. And a lot of people came out considering that there was a snowstorm. So that was cool.
Great.
But no, just trying to meet more people, man. Just trying to just expand my horizons.
Yeah.
And just try to learn more about different things.
Sure. Yeah.
You don't want to get stuck in your own head sometimes,
Fair enough.
Right.
And what's your favorite type of photography? Not to turn the questions around on, but what do you enjoy?
If I had to pick, probably street.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I like street photography a lot.
Yeah.
I like sort of the randomness of it.
Yeah.
And being able to get the moment, I think, is super cool.
The decisive moment.
And you gotta be patient. It doesn't happen right away. Maybe it does, but sometimes you gotta be there for a little bit.
No, park yourself in the right place and just wait for it to come. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta pay attention, right? And not be on your phone.
Yeah.
It's just hard sometimes.
For sure.
But
and none of this was to shoot down phone photographers as well. I want to make sure I always want to say that anybody that's taking pictures, it's a good thing, right? And phones, my gosh, they're good now, right? What they're capable of doing is pretty staggering. But,
it's all about the eye, right? I think to me, it's like if you have the eye, then you're in a good spot, right? Because you could have the greatest camera on earth, but if you don't have a good eye, then you're kind of missing the point.
For sure.
You know. So it's good, man. Well, thanks for coming on. We're kind of up against the hour, so
thank you very much for having me on again.
You crushed it on it. Well, you'll be back on. Don't worry.
Nice.
Everyone, thanks for watching and listening. Jason's links are in the description of this podcast. Any final words for the people out there?
No, just keep shooting, guys. Have lots of fun and buy a film camera. Let's keep that going. Let's keep that going.
I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The more that are out there, the more companies like Kodak and Ilford and will ramp up production with film, and it's good for all of us. So
yeah, no, exactly. It's a great message. Cool. Thanks, Jason, and we shall speak soon.
Okay.
Peace.
Bye, everybody. Cheers.